So, I think we can all agree that one of the best aspects of Football Manager is when you have a Wonderkid develop into a superstar under your management at your club. But arguably, that feeling is 10 times greater when it's a Wonderkid that is grown through your youth academy, through your youth intake, and then goes on to become that top tier player. It makes that feeling even better. But youth intakes in Football Manager can be rather annoying to get your head around. There are plenty of factors that can affect the quality of your youth intake, and we're going to talk about all of them today to try and give you guys the best chance of getting a top tier youth intake in your saves, which is arguably more important than ever now due to the fact that in the English divisions at least you can only sign a certain amount of Wonderkids a summer. So bringing through those homegrown Wonderkids is very important. So let's get right into it, and I'll give you plenty of tips of how you can increase your chances of getting a new golden generation for your club. Hi everybody, Jake here for FMSCOUT, and as mentioned in that intro, today's video is going to be all about youth intakes and how you can increase your chances of getting a good youth intake in Football Manager. When I did a similar video to this last year on FMSCOUT, I used a very important analogy that I think I have to point out here. As much as you can influence youth intakes, and we're going to go into how you can do that, youth intakes are still a lottery, but how I like to imagine it as, if you do these tips I'm going to show in this video, you've bought yourself more tickets to win that lottery and therefore you have a better chance. By using these tips, hopefully you'll get closer to that golden generation, and at the very least it's not going to harm you in terms of your club and raising your club's stature up to the highest level. So without further ado, we're going to get into all the tips on how you can increase your youth intake. But if you enjoy this kind of content, if you enjoy this video, I'd ask that you like the video so we can share it to as many people as possible. Comment down below any tips you think you might have found, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And you might also notice we're in a Newcastle save here. If you want to watch that, feel free to check out my channel, linked in the description, as we have a Newcastle save going over there, and a lot of you guys have really enjoyed it as we push for 5k subs. But anyway, you guys are here to hear about how you can improve your youth intake. So let's get right into it with arguably the major factor here. Now, before we delve into too much detail in these tips, I'm going to point out in this video that we're going to split it into halves really. The first half is going to be tips that can 100% improve your youth intakes, confirmed by a SI employee, the people that make Football Manager, and then the other half are going to be tips that he didn't necessarily confirm, but a lot of people have ran tests and found that these things can affect your youth intakes, or at least seem to, and it's spoken about in the community as things to do if you want to get a youth intake, and it's not going to harm your chances of getting that golden generation. So we're here with Newcastle, and you probably wouldn't believe it, but the first thing, it's not your facilities, it's not your youth recruitment, it's nothing like that. One of the most important factors in getting a good youth intake is your club's reputation. You can see this on the club info screen, but it makes perfect sense when you think about it. If you've got 100 clubs in a nation, the more reputable clubs, if you're a budding Wonderkid superstar footballer and you're 14 years old and all the clubs in the world have gone, we want you to join our youth academy, you're not going to look at your Vanarama South and North teams, you're not going to look at your Wigans and your Boltons, you're going to look at Chelsea's, Man City's, Manchester United, Liverpool's, these clubs with great academies, great reputations in the world of football, and that's where you're going to want to choose, and therefore that's going to increase your chances of a good youth intake. Now that seems obvious. How can you improve this reputation? Well, I saw this in a Zealand video once. It's pretty simple. You just need to win. You just need to keep winning, develop your club, and I don't mean one-off matches. That will help, but it's more about winning over time and getting yourself into Champions League competitions or getting further in the Champions League, winning an FA Cup, that kind of thing. Winning cups, winning trophies and winning matches will raise your club's reputation and in turn hopefully help you get better youth intakes. Another factor that is quite clearly important but maybe doesn't hold as much of a weighting as you might think is your junior coaching and your youth recruitment. If we start by thinking about youth recruitment, this is basically how big your net is in terms of sweeping up youngsters from the area. If you had really poor youth recruitment, chances are you'd only get players from, for example, if your team was Leicester, you'd only get people from the Leicester area. The bigger your youth recruitment, you might start picking out people from Birmingham and the rest of the Midlands, and then if you make it even bigger, you might start picking up people from Newcastle, Manchester, that kind of thing, into your guys' squad. So the bigger your youth recruitment, the wider you cast your net, the better chance of bringing in one of those top tier youngsters. Junior coaching, academy coaching, whatever you want to call it, is basically the level of coaches in your invisible under 14s, under 13s teams that you can't actually see, but when you develop this, it's going to increase the chances of a quality player coming through in your youth intake. Again, it might not be as much as you think, but it is something that can help out your club. On top of that, you've got your youth facilities, which I actually messed up in last year's video. I mentioned that your 18s and your 23 years old would use youth facilities, but from what I've seen, most sources of actual importance they've confirmed that your youth facilities are only used by your invisible players before they become under 23s, under 18s players, all of which will use your training facilities. Your youth facilities are again for those invisible under 12, under 13s teams that you're not seeing. The better youth facilities, the better pitches they've got to play on, the better quality of equipment they've got, and the more chance you've got of having a good quality player come through in your youth intake. If you guys do want to improve your facilities, your coaching, and your recruitment, as you probably already know, you just have to come over to the Club Vision screen, and if the board seem to favour you, you can request it here. So for example, I can't do it right now, but if I wanted to, I could come here and request an improvement to my youth recruitment range, and that will increase the chances of good youngsters coming through. As you can see, I've already started to do it here at Newcastle. The next thing to talk about that officially does affect your youth intake quality is your head of youth development, but it might be in a different way to what you might think. As you can see here at Newcastle, we've got Steve Harper as our head of youth development, and you probably just look at his attributes and go, yeah, he'd do a good job as the head of youth development, right? Well, you're not wrong, but this isn't really the influence you're worried about in terms of your youth intake. Yes, these attributes are great, but the real things that are important are the factors that I'm going to talk about now. So firstly, again, reputation does hold a weight in terms of youth intake. Imagine yourself as a young player again. Are you going to work with the best head of youth development in the world or a fairly average one? That obviously does come into effect, but arguably one of the most important things is the personality section and the preferred formation. The personality of your head of youth development will rub off on the youth intake he brings through and the kind of players that he brings through. At the end of the day, it's him handpicking the players that are going to come through in that intake, so of course he's going to pick people that are professional like him or hardworking like him. So getting a head of youth development with a good personality is always useful. It doesn't mean every player that comes through will be professional, but you will see every now and then that will rub off on some players, and the chances are the core of the group will have a good professional personality. On top of this, I mentioned preferred formations. So how this works is if you had a preferred formation of 5-3-2, chances are in his youth intakes he's going to bring through wing backs and that kind of thing, and maybe more strikers because there's 2 strikers. In a 4-4-2, he might bring in some left midfielders and some right midfielders. If it was a 4-2-3-1, you might be looking at some wingers and 2 central midfielders as opposed to a defensive midfielder. All them kind of things do come into play, and whilst it doesn't really matter too much if you just want some great players to come through, if you're trying to mould a club over the long term into playing some kind of tactic, then that is going to hold some pretty significant weight in. If out of 10 players that come through, 3 of them are wing backs and you don't use a wing back in your system, you're going to be pretty annoyed. So getting that preferred formation into at least a similar formation to what you play can be useful in bringing players that you want to use into your club. One of the biggest factors, however, in your youth intake is slightly unique in FM22, and that is your youth level and football importance. I can't remember the exact word for it, but it's something like that. So basically how it works is every nation has a hidden attribute in the editor that you'll only be able to see if you have the pre-game editor, which I'm not even sure if it's been released yet at the time of recording because we are in beta stage, so I assume not, but you'll be able to see a nation's youth level pretty much. What this means is, as you've probably seen in many a save that you've done for a few years, England, Germany, Spain, Portugal, the Netherlands, Argentina, Brazil, these countries that are known for producing superstars will, of course, develop more superstars than the Honduras or Indonesia or China, that kind of thing. The football importance attribute basically works where in the US, football isn't a major sport there, so there's going to be less people coming through in the US that are Wonderkids because there's less youngsters taking up football, supposedly. And then in England, of course, football is very important, so there's plenty of emphasis put on that football importance, and therefore there's a better chance of producing a Wonderkid in your youth intake. But what is unique to this year's FM22 is, for once, this is dynamic, meaning if you did start a save in Iceland, let's say, Iceland, they're not going to be super down the list in terms of their youth rating, but they're not going to be up there either. So if you were to develop Iceland as a footballing nation, maybe one of their teams gets into a Champions League group stage, maybe after a few years they're consistently in the knockouts, maybe that draws more money into the nation, maybe then you've got a couple more teams getting in the Europa League and a Champions League, there's going to be more kids taking up football, and therefore this youth rating can actually change over time to give Iceland a better chance of producing Wonderkids. That will make rebuilding a whole nation a very fun idea, even going on to manage a national team with all these Wonderkids produced as you've developed a nation with a club. These kind of things can now happen thanks to this dynamic youth rating, so that is awesome. So if you are out there in Indonesia and your youth intake comes through and you think, where's my Messi and Ronaldo, there's probably a reason why. Before we get into all the things that people talk about might influence youth intake, but I can't find any real concrete sources to officially confirm this. I still believe in these, but I can't find anything to really confirm this. I will talk about one thing that I've seen everybody saying, and I mean everybody. I've seen it in comments under my last year's video, I've seen it in Discord chats, and that is people saying, my first youth intake is my best one. Now, There might be something to this. I can't say that there fully isn't because I haven't tested it a million times myself, but I have seen in a few saves it feels like that is the case, but I'm going to explain why it feels like that's the case now. So let me take you over to Portsmouth for this example. So Portsmouth, if you were managing them, is a good squad for Portsmouth's level right now. But a 4.5-star, 5-star Portsmouth player in this squad, star rating is representative of the team you're at and the other players at the club. So a 4.5-star player at Portsmouth isn't the same as a 4.5-star player at Manchester United and Chelsea. So, I mean, that makes perfect sense, of course. These players are amazing for Portsmouth's side, but in the general world of football, wouldn't have that star rating, else it'd be boring playing as a team like Portsmouth and seeing every player as their realistic rating, which would likely be 1.5 or 1 star. So star ratings aren't majorly important. But why I think people get this mixed up in their youth intake is because in that first year, chances are you haven't developed the squad too much yet. So even if there is like a half decent player in that youth intake, comparing him to the level of your squad, he is going to look like this 5-star amazing golden generation wonder kid. But in reality, if you got him when you were in the Premier League, he would have been a very average player coming through your youth intake that you would have forgotten about. So that's why I think, because after a few years you will start developing your club, of course, and therefore these players that come in don't look as good as the players in your squad. So I think that is why people see that. Again, I could be wrong, but I think that is where it comes from. But I'm very conscious of dragging this video out any more than it needs to be, so I'll quickly go over a few other things that people have said can influence youth intake, but I don't know if these are 100% true. Feel free to let me know in the comments if you have any confirmation of this. But the first one is your manager's reputation. Again, works like head of youth development reputation and club reputation. I can see this, I can get the idea. Young players are likely going to want to pick a club that is managed by Guardiola, Tuchel, Klopp over me. Again, this isn't something I can fully confirm, but I could see it making sense and I can see why people think that would potentially affect your youth intake. Furthermore, something that I do genuinely believe in is if you go to your scouting and your scouting knowledge page, I spoke about this last year in last year's video, but I think your club's knowledge of the world can affect the youth intake players that come through. So for example here, Shola Amiobi, a Newcastle legend in his own right, has great knowledge of Nigeria. If you go onto his profile screen, you can see Nigeria, England and Turkey. He has good knowledge of Turkey, not so much, but the other two for sure. So if there was a Nigerian player coming through the youth intake, I could probably put that down to the fact that we have a bit of knowledge of Nigeria and therefore might have seen a good player and brought him through. But how I think this is even more greatly affected is if we go to Steve Harper, our head of youth development. He knows players from England and Northern Ireland, so he's got more of a chance of bringing through those people into the club. And seeing as we are a team in England, this is of course going to help. If we brought in a head of youth development who only had knowledge of China but was here in England, chances are he isn't going to know the region, and in his first few years as he gets that knowledge up, he might not produce as good players because he doesn't know the area so much, and that makes perfect sense to me. So that is something that I do believe will come into play, and that is your world knowledge. And that ties hand in hand with another thing that people believe, which is affiliate clubs, which I can see again making sense. If you are affiliated to a club, you get knowledge of that area. For example, if I was affiliated to a club in the US, I then get knowledge of that area of the US over time, and therefore if I saw in my youth intake a US player came through, I could probably link that to the fact that we now have knowledge of that US area because of our affiliate club. Gives us greater scouting knowledge, gives us more chance of casting that net even wider and getting some better youth intake players in, and therefore you've increased your chance of a good youth intake. So that's pretty much everything. I know it's probably been a bit of a longer one, a bit more of a technical video than you guys are used to, but like I say, it's a lottery ticket. The more lottery tickets you buy, the more things that you do here to improve your chances of that great youth intake, the better chance you've got of having that Mason Mount, your Mason Greenwoods, those kind of players that have came up over the years through your academy. So hopefully if you put a few of these tips together, you're definitely not going to hurt your chances. I think it's always a good idea anyway, if you're building a club up, to improve these things over time. Just keep that in mind, but as I did mention, about 3/4 of this video was things officially confirmed by Seb Vassell, or Wassel, I don't know how to pronounce it, on the SI forums. Everything else is things I've spoke about in videos before, seen other Football Manager YouTubers speak about, had people in the comments who have ran their own tests found. So again, take everything towards the end of the video with a pinch of salt. But I mean, you're not going to do yourself any harm in improving your scouting knowledge of the world. If anyone else knows any other tips or has any confirmation of some of the tips I've mentioned, feel free to link it in the comments or talk about it. Thank you all for watching. Hopefully you did enjoy it. If you got some use, hit the like button, comment down below anything you like, subscribe to the channel, feel free to check out my Newcastle save, linked in the description, and have a great day everyone. I'll see you soon. Goodbye.